This talk is part of a series presented by the TechAide AI4Good conference and hackathon. Our goal with this virtual event is to highlight technological innovation driven by AI and directed towards beneficial areas such as health, the environment, accessibility, and human rights. Importantly, we also aim at raising money for TechAide, a nonprofit dedicated to fighting poverty and social exclusion. And this is where you can help. Please consider donating by clicking the corresponding link in the description section of this video. Any amount will be greatly appreciated. Also, if you are watching this before November 12, 2020, consider registering to our event for a chance to ask questions and interact with our great speakers. This event would not have been possible without the help of our sponsors such as DeepMind, Ubisoft, Ivado, and Dell Technologies. We thank them for their generous support, and please visit our website for our full list of sponsors and partners. Finally, I'd like to give a special shout out to one of our sponsors. For those who don't know yet, Ubisoft La Forge is a collaborative space created by my colleague Yves Shakir. At Ubisoft Montreal, they bring together experts from their studio and experts from the academic sector to accelerate R&D through prototyping. Through this process, they want to complement academic learnings while testing the potential benefits and technological innovations in virtual worlds, fill the gap between theory and practice. I invite you to visit their website, laforge.ubisoft.com, where you will find articles from their researchers and videos showing their prototypes. And with that, I'll leave you to enjoy our featured presentation.
Greetings. It's so great to be with you here today as part of the 2020 TechAide AI4Good conference. My name is Shakir Mohamed, and my pronouns are he or they. I've entitled this talk, Imaginations of Good, Missions for Change, and is meant to be both a conversation and a provocation to engage with you in considering how we might build a new type of critical and technical practice of AI for good, which is of course the theme of this year's conference. The conference has a fulfilling mission, and I'm grateful to the organizers for giving me the chance to support their charitable aims in this way, and hope you will be able to support the cause in any ways you can. Mankind barely noticed when the concept of massively organized information quietly emerged to become a means of social control. I'd like you to guess when this might have been written. Given the increasingly concerning news items and so much incredible recent scholarship, you might guess that this is a recent description of algorithmic harms that emerged over the past 2 decades. You would be wrong. This is Edwin Black's description of the world of 1900 and the invention of the punch card and a new wave of automation and data collection. During this period, the little-known fields of computing and statistics, the pillars of today's field of artificial intelligence, became turbocharged with the ability to sort through large amounts of data. With enhanced statistical ability, we were now able to accurately and at the scale of nations and continents identify objects of interest, assess trade-offs between competing choices, organize the best sequence of actions, and finally, audit the efficiency of any chosen course of actions. This was a boon for almost every sector. The possibilities of good and imaginations of new types of futures that were now possible must have been exhilarating, not unlike what we feel as AI technologists and scientists today. But what if this enhanced statistical ability and new actions and efficiencies were used for the murder of Jewish people? This is how statistics and the tech industry of that age entered its dark phase and turned towards evil ends and genocide. As Edwin Black forensically documents, for Nazi officials and throughout the Second World War, statistics became invaluable for the Reich, and the Reich hoped to give statistics new tasks in peace and war. By abstracting away from the context of its work, computational science uncritically advanced its methods for greater accuracy, efficiency, and financial profit, and enabled the death of millions. History reminds us that technological evolution tends to set ablaze high hopes coupled with cruel capabilities. Do we remember this foundation of our field of artificial intelligence? I'm telling this story to open up a discussion about the many concerns enveloping the project of AI4Good that have been raised in recent years. The concerns and objections raised about AI4Good are many. These include the pet project critique, that projects under the banner of AI4Good are not more than researchers' pet projects in applied domains without any real intention for impact. The hype critique, that AI4Good advances a techno-optimistic and techno-solutionist view of the world that promises prosperity for society, but with very little evidence that this has ever been the case. The exploitation critique, that the project of AI4Good is a veneer we put over technical products as part of its marketing strategy. Here, the project of AI4Good is not aimed to meaningfully learn and engage with the communities it serves, but cloaks the real aim of data collection and profit. The vagueness critique, that our approach to AI4Good is enacted without specificity and lacks a rigorous foundation in politics or social change, and in this way consistently fails to engage with what it means to be good. All these critiques have a strong basis of evidence for us to take seriously. Like the story of statistics and the Reich, these critiques shake and destabilize our confidence as technical designers and opens us up to the possibility that our work can instead be implicated in harm. It would be wrong to be all gloom and doom about the project of AI4Good. We do find many examples of great work that inspires us deeply into what is possible with contemporary AI. And when we find these instances, they point us to the paths of alterity that are already possible. I'd like to draw on 3 examples to dig a bit deeper into this question of good with you. The first example is the challenge of documenting and providing an evidentiary basis relating to human rights abuses. Amnesty International has shown that remote sensing data combined with artificial intelligence can be a powerful way to scale up human rights research. Worldwide, 9 out of 10 people breathe unclean air. Unfortunately, this is mostly happening in low-income countries. This is where the amazing work of AirCo comes in to provide accurate predictions of air quality using a custom-built network of low-cost sensors that collects data across 65 locations in Uganda. With the COVID pandemic, non-pharmaceutical interventions are a concept we have all become acutely aware of, and air quality predictions provide another route for such interventions. The power of this incredible work lies in its potential to help citizens and governments better plan and mitigate changing environmental conditions. And these are the types of policy support we will continue to need more of. The Serengeti Masai Mara ecosystem is one of our world's last pristine ecosystems, and the place that supports one of our world's great animal migrations. This project by Snapshot Serengeti uses images from camera traps to help conservationists learn which management strategies work best to protect the species that call this area home. Machine learning has helped to accelerate the study and analysis of the images collected, helping develop new theories of ecological function and a better understanding of the secret lives of the animals of the Serengeti. I was lucky to visit this region in 2019, and I thought I'd share this video of my own experience of this great spectacle of nature. During the discussion, please share your own examples of projects that shine the light on what is possible and good. One common feature of the three examples I chose here is that they are centered on a clear mission for change. The mission to strengthen evidence for human rights, the mission to support public health with better environmental understanding, the mission to safeguard the world's pristine ecosystems. These examples are not about projects seeking to do AI for good. For them, AI for good is a consequence of working towards a clear mission for change. And this is my first point of conversation for you, that we can address the critiques of AI for good by putting in place the strategies that destabilize our confidence as technical designers by first and always centering the mission for change we are supporting. For anyone working in the charitable and non-governmental sector, this is eminently familiar, and from their experience and methodology, we can learn a great deal. I was lucky to be part of a collective to explore and develop these ways of thinking that we wrote about in a short paper. The key tool used in these areas is to develop and communicate a theory of change. The theory of change is often communicated as a diagram that maps the current state of the sector we are working in to the desired change we hope to see in the world. While the theory of change is a requirement in the charitable sector, I think it can take a powerful role as a tool for shaping research and AI for good. By using a theory of change, we can directly address the critiques I reviewed earlier. By making explicit the mission for change, we can ensure the discussion about the political and social basis that forms the definition of good in our work takes place at the beginning of our work and then throughout the lifetime of any project. The definition of good then becomes tied to the change mission. As we all know, for any piece of work, there are also competing factors and methodologies, and by plotting the path from a current state to a desired vision, these alternatives are also debated and discussed. It is also important that the theory of change recognizes that we don't work alone and that we are not the only actors in any area we work in. So, humility of approach is important, and any piece of work must assess how any ultimate change can be attributed to the work or an intervention. This last point is especially important because it emphasizes the role of measurement in assessing whether or not good outcomes have been reached and being explicit about beneficiaries and who is ignored. Assessing for whom the outcomes are good. A theory of change aims to be a causal graph from programs and interventions to measures and outcomes. When charting this course of change, measurement can be thought of at every place in the causal chain, although measurement is hard. Now, switching gears a bit, the question I'd like to pose to you now is a simple one. Is global AI truly global? This is a suggestive question because, for the most part, AI is not global. Instead, it is localized and contained in specific individuals, organizations, and countries. And perhaps we can say the same of global science as well. We can shine a light on this by looking at the number of researchers in different countries as one rough proxy. Here in the United Kingdom, or in similar countries like Germany or Canada or the United States, we find around 4,000 researchers per 1 million people. In South Africa, where I am proudly from, this number is 400 per million. And in Ghana, the number is closer to 40 per million. It is easy to become tempted as part of the grand vision of a theory of change to create a universalizing view of applicability of the advantages of the technology we hope to eventually develop. But this simple review of researcher numbers shows that the contributions to global knowledge are at present far from uniform. So any view on universality of AI needs to be more deeply questioned, and it is starting with this realization that we can make a deeper theoretical analysis of the project of AI for Good. Since many AI for Good projects target social, humanitarian, or developmental needs, questions about how they imagine, understand, and use knowledge becomes the core area of interrogation. Our epistemological bases and implicitly held and unquestioned beliefs about knowledge reveal themselves in the attitudes taken when doing research and development. Attitudes on knowledge transfer. By their nature, AI for Good projects implicitly or explicitly acknowledge that knowledge and expertise is imbalanced in the world. For AI for Good, part of our work seemingly becomes to assist the migration of knowledge from centers of power, like our research laboratories, to places where it is lacking. Attitudes of benevolence. An implicit attitude that emerges is that where information, knowledge, or technology is lacking, technical development should be undertaken by the knowledgeable or powerful on behalf of those others who are to be affected or changed by it. Attitudes on portability. Knowledge and representations applied to any particular place or situation are believed to be just as applicable to any other situation or place, and that knowledge schemes developed anywhere will work just as well anywhere else. Attitudes of quantification. An inevitable conversation is that quantification and statistical accounts of the world as tools for comparison, evaluation, understanding, and prediction is the sole way of understanding the world. And finally, attitudes on the standard of excellence. As a last concern, do we assume the standards and forms and the world within our research labs, in our metropole, so that is, within our centers of knowledge and technical power, are to be models of the future for other regions? It is not always easy for us to question where these attitudes come from, but it is something we must do. These attitudes are partly the remnants of an older way of living and thinking forced on us all by our shared experience of colonialism. Colonialism was amongst the last and largest missions undertaken under the banner of good, ostensibly to bring civilization and modernity and democracy and technology to those that did not have it. Colonialism's impact continues to influence us today. Physically, in the way our borders are shaped, psychologically, in how we think about ourselves and each other, linguistically, in the role of English today as the language of science and exchange, by racism and racialization that was invented during the colonial era to establish hierarchical orders of division between people, economically, in how labor is extracted in one place and profit generated elsewhere, and politically, within the structures of governance, laws, and international relations that still fall along colonialism's fault lines. We refer to colonialism's remnants and impacts on knowledge and understanding in the present using the term coloniality. So, my second point of conversation for you is to contend with the coloniality of AI for Good. Coloniality seeks to explain the continuation of patterns of power between colonizer and colonized and the contemporary remnants of those relationships. Coloniality asks how power relations shape our understanding of culture, labor, intersubjectivity, and knowledge. When projects for good fail, what is found are default attitudes of paternalism, technological solutionism, and predatory inclusion. The approach I used to unpack the attitudinal concerns relating to knowledge follows one particular route of thinking about decolonization of knowledge. In this view of decolonization, we are asked to reappraise what is considered the foundation of an intellectual discipline, by emphasizing and recognizing the legitimacy of knowledge that has been previously marginalized. This realization will lead us to make what is often called the decolonial turn, And for our field of AI, I have phrased this as a question of how we reshape our work as a field of decolonial AI. Despite colonial power, the historical record shows that colonialism was never only an act of imposition. There was usually also a reversal of roles, where the metropole had to confront knowledge in the colonies and take lessons from the periphery, in all the spheres of governance, rights, management, and policy. A reverse tutelage between the center and periphery was created, although with a great deal of loss and violence. By turning this insight into a tool we can use, a modern critical practice seeks to use a decolonial imperative to develop a double vision, actively identifying centers and peripheries that make reverse tutelage part of its foundations, while also seeking to undo harmful binaries of the powerful and oppressed, of metropole and periphery, of scientist and humanist, of natural and artificial. Reverse tutelage directly speaks to the philosophical questions of what constitutes knowledge. There remains a tension between a view of knowledge as absolute and of data that, once enough is collected, allows us to form complete and encompassing abstractions of the world, versus a view of knowledge and data that is always incomplete and subject to selections and interpretation under differing value systems. Deciding what counts as valid knowledge, what is included within a dataset, and what is ignored and unquestioned is a form of power held by us as AI researchers that cannot be left unacknowledged. It is in confronting this condition that decolonial science, and particularly the tactic of reverse tutelage, makes its mark. Reverse pedagogies create a decolonial shift from paternalism towards solidarity. This gives us two immediate tactics. The first is to create systems of meaningful intercultural dialogue and new modes of broader participation in technology development and research. A second tactic lies in how we support new types of political community that are able to reform systems of hierarchy, knowledge, technology, and culture at play in modern life. As one approach, I am a passionate advocate for the support of grassroots organizations and in their ability to create new forms of understanding, elevate intercultural dialogue, and demonstrate the forms of solidarity and alternative community that are already possible. I would like to share my own experience of putting this theory of community into practice. Around 4 years ago, I was part of a collective of people to create a new organization called the Deep Learning Indaba, whose mission is to strengthen machine learning across our African continent. Over the years of our work, we have been able to build new communities, create leadership, and recognize excellence in the development and use of artificial intelligence across Africa. And what a privilege it has been to see young people across Africa develop their ideas, present them for the first time, to receive recognition for their work, and to know amongst their peers that their questions and approaches are important and part of the way they are uniquely shaping our continent's future. As I reach the end of our journey together, I'd like to share one problem area with a clear mission for change, which forms this year's Indaba Grand Challenge. The change mission I'd like you to consider is the eradication of neglected tropical diseases, or NTDs. Approximately 1.4 billion people, 1/6 of the world's population, suffer from one or more NTDs. And they are neglected because they generally afflict the world's poor and historically has not received as much attention as other diseases. And this word neglect is important since, as a very common phrase highlights, neglected diseases are also diseases of neglected people. The role of coloniality is important to connect with here, since we must ask questions of why historically and in the present such neglect exists, not just for NTDs, but in so many areas where AI for good is called on. NTDs are a broad category of diseases, and I'm showing here the categorization used by the World Health Organization, the WHO. We are lucky that 2020 has been an important year for neglected diseases, since the WHO has released an important new roadmap that builds dialogue, connects expertise and communities, and clarifies the measurement needed to address this problem. As the WHO Director for Neglected Diseases, Dr. Mwelechele Malachela, said to me a few months ago, there is now an opportunity for machine learning and AI to support this important mission, whether that is in the area of drug repurposing, or in diagnosis and detection, or physician training. There is so much to do in this space, and by creating a task for a specific disease of leishmaniasis, the deep learning Indaba has tried to build a broad coalition to help raise awareness and encourage research in this area. Partnering with Zindi, Africa's own data science competition platform, with InstaDeep, one of Africa's leading AI and technology startups, with DNDi, the Drugs for Neglected Diseases initiatives, the World Health Organization, WHO, the IDRC, the Canadian Development Institute, amongst many others, to take a first step in this direction. My pitch to you is to consider the contributions you might be able to make with your expertise and attention towards any part of this important problem. If I have accomplished my aims, then we have together reached this point provoked by two streams of thinking. Firstly, that we must take seriously the criticism of the project of AI for good and can perhaps rescue it by recentering our AI for good efforts instead of towards the generic attainment of good, but towards the attainment of a specific change mission. And secondly, that to continue to be ahistorical in our approach to machine learning risks reproducing harms of the past. How we remember our past and what we remember determines how we see the future. We have the advantage of historical hindsight, and by taking a reflexive approach to AI that uncovers coloniality's role in our work and systems, we can develop new tools and tactics of foresight and action. The challenges we are experiencing across the world today during the COVID pandemic has led us all to ask many questions of ourselves and our work. With these challenges has come a renewed sense of the importance of connections, of community, and of our collective prosperity. This year's TechAide conference speaks to that important need, and I think we can still optimistically say, with reflexive and decolonial tools aiding us, that we can together use AI to make our contributions to the vision of a world without neglect, filled with prosperity and filled with joy. To end, I thought we could read a poem together. It is one I use to capture the vision for my own approach to research in AI. It's one of my favorites and maybe soon one of yours. It's entitled Machines by Michael Donaghy. Dearest, note how these two are alike. This harpsichord pavan by Purcell and the race's 12-speed bike. The machinery of grace is always simple. This chrome trapezoid, one wheel connected to another of concentric circles which Ptolemy dreamt of and Schwinn perfected, is gone. The cyclist, not the cycle, steers, and in the playing, Purcell's chords are played away. So this talk, or touch if I were there, should work its effortless gadgetry of love like Dante's heaven and melt into the air. If it does, of course I've fallen. So much is chance, so much agility, desire, and feverish care, as bicyclists and harpsichordists prove, who only by moving can balance, only by balancing move. As a short postscript, some resources that might be of interest. Edwin Black's forensically detailed book, IBM and the Holocaust, the strategic alliance between Nazi Germany and America's most powerful corporation. Kentaro Toyama's book, Geek Heresy, Rescuing Social Change from the Cult of Technology. Priyamvada Gopal's incredible book of literary criticism, Insurgent Empire, Anti-Colonial Resistance and British Dissent, and Coldry and Mejias's book, The Costs of Connection, How Data is Colonizing Human Life and Appropriating It for Capitalism. And 3 pieces of writing I've contributed to: AI for Social Good, Unlocking the Opportunity for Positive Change; Decolonial AI, Decolonial Theory, a Socio-Technical Foresight in Artificial Intelligence; and Domesticating the Techno-Racial Project. Thank you again. This talk is part of a series that aims to collect money for TechAide, a non-profit dedicated to fighting poverty and social exclusion. I urge you to click the link in the video to donate and support them in fighting poverty and supporting social inclusion.